The evening air hung heavy with the promise of summer, thick and warm against Edward Harris's skin. Oakwood Street stretched before him, a familiar path he had walked countless times over the past 4 decades. His grocery bag swayed gently with each measured step, the brown paper crinkling softly against his leg. Inside were the essentials he always bought: a loaf of whole wheat bread, a carton of milk, some fresh vegetables from Mr. Rodriguez's corner store, and a small tin of his favorite butterscotch candies. Edward's watch, a gift from his late wife Martha on their 25th anniversary, gleamed subtly in the fading light. The timepiece had seen better days, its silver band slightly scratched, the face etched with tiny marks that told stories of years gone by. But Edward kept it meticulously clean, polishing it every Sunday morning just as Martha had always done. At 67, he moved with a deliberate grace that spoke of discipline. Years of teaching high school history had given him a posture that commanded quiet respect. His dark skin bore the rich patina of a life lived fully, with lines that mapped out decades of laughter, challenges, and quiet resilience. Tonight, like most evenings, he was returning from his volunteer work at the community center, helping young students with their homework, sharing stories, offering guidance. The street seemed peaceful. Old oak trees lined the sidewalk, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the last rays of sunlight. Residential houses stood like silent sentinels, some well-maintained, others showing signs of economic struggle. This was Oakwood, a neighborhood that had seen better days but still held on to hope. 3 young men had been watching Edward for weeks. They weren't strangers to the neighborhood, but they were strangers to its deeper rhythms. Jake, the oldest at 21, wore his frustration like a second skin. Unemployment had worn down his patience, and the world seemed to have forgotten about him and his friends. Beside him stood Ramon, 19, his eyes darting nervously, and Tyler, barely 18, trying to prove himself worthy of the group. They had been drinking earlier, cheap beer from the corner store, their conversations spinning between anger and desperation. Jake's unemployment check had just run out. His mother was working double shifts, and the pressure to contribute was overwhelming. Ramon had dropped out of high school, seeing no future in education. Tyler, the youngest, was desperate to prove he belonged. "There he is," Jake muttered, nodding towards Edward, "always walking like he owns the street." Ramon shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just go home." But Jake was beyond listening. The day's frustrations, the mounting bills, the sense of being trapped, it all condensed into a single moment of misguided intention. Edward noticed them before they moved. Years of teaching had given him an instinctive awareness of potential threats. His body tensed almost imperceptibly, a lifetime of experiences creating a subtle alertness. He adjusted his grocery bag, ensuring he could move if needed. The first approach was calculated. Jake stepped directly into Edward's path, blocking the sidewalk. "Good evening," he called out, his voice a mixture of challenge and forced politeness. Edward stopped. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, took in the entire scene: Jake's aggressive stance, Ramon's hesitation, Tyler's nervous energy. "Good evening," he responded evenly, his voice carrying the calm of a man who had faced far more challenging situations. For a moment, time seemed to suspend. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows. A dog barked in the distance. The tension grew, thick as the summer air. Jake's friends moved to either side of Edward. What had begun as a vague impulse was now transforming into something more dangerous. Ramon's hand twitched near his pocket. Was that a knife? Tyler bounced slightly on his toes, caught between excitement and fear. Edward knew the next few moments would define everything. His mind raced, not with fear, but with a calm assessment. He thought of his son Michael, of the lessons he had taught about dignity, about choosing wisdom over violence. He thought of Martha, who would have urged compassion. But compassion, he was about to learn, would be tested in ways he could never have imagined. The first move came suddenly, a push, then another. Edward's grocery bag fell, vegetables spilling onto the sidewalk. The butterscotch candy scattered like small golden coins, catching the streetlight. and then everything changed. The emergency room hummed with its usual cacophony of urgent whispers and medical precision. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on Edward's bruised face, each shadow telling a story of pain. Nurse Elena Rodriguez moved with practiced gentleness, her touch both professional and compassionate as she adjusted his IV and checked his vitals. Edward's eyes remained closed, but he wasn't sleeping. Years of teaching had given him an ability to observe without seeming to do so. He listened to the rhythms of the hospital, the distant beeping of machines, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes, the muted conversations that leaked through curtained sections. Dr. Michael Chen reviewed the chart, his brow furrowed with professional concern. Multiple contusions, 2 cracked ribs, and signs of significant trauma, he muttered to the attending nurse. Remarkable that he's stable, given the extent of the injuries. The photograph on Edward's bedside table caught Elena's attention. It was a military portrait, a young man in dress uniform, standing with such precision that the image seemed to radiate discipline and pride. The frame was slightly worn, its silver edges showing years of careful handling. She recognized the insignia of a high-ranking military officer, but something about the way Edward looked at the photo suggested a deeper story. Detective Maria Reyes entered the room, her notebook already open. She had seen countless assault cases, but something about this one felt different. The hospital's sterile environment seemed to hold its breath, waiting. "Mr. Harris," she began softly, pulling a chair closer to the bed, "I'd like to talk about what happened." Edward's eyes opened slowly. They were a deep brown, clear and intelligent, holding no trace of the fear one might expect from a recent assault victim. "What would you like to know?" He responded, his voice slightly raspy but steady. Maria noticed how he didn't immediately launch into a description of the attack. Instead, he seemed to be carefully considering his words. She glanced at the photograph. "Is that your son?" A subtle smile crossed Edward's face. "Major Michael Harris. He's serving overseas," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and something else. Concern, perhaps even a hint of protective worry. The detective studied the room. Edward's personal belongings were neatly arranged, a well-worn leather wallet, a set of keys on a simple ring, and a small notebook with edges softened by years of use. Everything spoke of a man who valued order, who had lived a life of careful consideration. "Tell me about the incident," Maria prompted, her pen poised. Edward took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pain from his cracked ribs. "Some young men approached me on Oakwood Street. It wasn't a conversation, more of a confrontation." His words were measured, precise, a teacher's habit of careful communication. Elena, still adjusting monitors nearby, found herself listening intently. In her years as a nurse, she had learned that victims often told their stories in unique ways. Edward's narrative seemed to be unfolding like a carefully written lesson plan. They seemed lost. Edward continued, angry. Not at me specifically, but at something larger. Something I recognized from years of teaching. A sense of being trapped, of seeing no way forward. Detective Reyes leaned forward. This wasn't a typical victim statement. Edward wasn't seeking sympathy or revenge. He was attempting to understand. A soft beep from the medical equipment punctuated the silence. Dr. Chen returned, checking Edward's chart. "You're healing remarkably well," he observed. "Most patients with these injuries would be much more distressed." Edward's response was typical of a lifelong educator. "Perspective is everything, doctor. Physical wounds heal. The deeper injuries are the ones we can't see." Maria watched the interaction, her investigative instincts firing. The photograph of the military son, Edward's calm demeanor, the subtle hints of a deeper narrative. Something significant was emerging. Outside the hospital window, the city continued its evening rhythm. Streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows. But inside this room, a different story was unfolding. A story of resilience, of understanding beyond the immediate moment of violence. "I'd like to help," Edward said suddenly, looking directly at Detective Reyes. "These young men, they need guidance, not punishment." The room seemed to pause, absorbing the unexpected statement. A teacher's compassion, even in the face of personal assault, was about to change everything. The Oakwood Community Library stood as a testament to decades of local history. Detective Maria Reyes spread her investigation documents across a quiet corner table, surrounded by shelves that held stories far deeper than her case file. Edward Harris wasn't just another victim. He was a thread connected to something much larger. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, the library's head archivist, pulled out a dusty yearbook from 1980. Her fingers, weathered by years of handling delicate documents, traced the pages carefully. Edward Harris, she said, her voice carrying the weight of institutional memory, was more than just a teacher. He was a catalyst. The yearbook revealed a younger Edward, sharp-dressed, standing in front of a classroom, his eyes bright with purpose. Newspaper clippings tucked between the pages told a story of a dedicated educator who had transformed lives during challenging times. Maria's notes began to paint a comprehensive picture. Edward had taught history at Oakwood High School for over 3 decades, but it wasn't just about delivering lessons from textbooks. He had a reputation for going beyond traditional education, creating programs that supported struggling students, bridging gaps that traditional schooling often overlooked. Across town, in a small community center, Edward's former colleague James Rodriguez sat down with Detective Reyes. A retired guidance counselor, James remembered everything. Edward had this remarkable ability, he explained, to see potential where others saw problems. When other teachers gave up on a student, Edward would find a way to connect. The detective learned about specific instances. There was Marcus Williams, now a successful architect, who had nearly dropped out of high school before Edward intervened. Another student, Alina Ramirez, credited Edward with helping her secure a scholarship that changed her entire family's trajectory. He understood something fundamental about education, James continued. It wasn't just about academics, it was about understanding human potential. Maria's investigation took her to the local police archives. She discovered incident reports that told a subtle story. In years past, Edward had been instrumental in creating community outreach programs. He worked with local law enforcement to develop mentorship initiatives, helping young people find direction instead of falling into destructive patterns. At the Oakwood Community Center, where Edward still volunteered, staff members spoke about him with a mixture of respect and affection. Lisa Martinez, the program coordinator, pulled out files of ongoing youth support programs. Mr. Harris designed many of these, she said, spreading out documents that showed carefully crafted intervention strategies. The picture emerging was complex. Edward wasn't just a victim. He was a man who had spent his entire life working to prevent exactly the kind of situation he now found himself in. Each document, each testimony revealed layers of intentional community building. Detective Reyes tracked down some of Edward's former students. Their stories were remarkably consistent. They spoke of a teacher who understood that education extended far beyond classroom walls. He had helped students navigate family challenges, economic difficulties, and systemic barriers. One particularly revealing conversation happened with Robert Jenkins, now a local community leader. Edward taught us that our circumstances don't define us, he explained. He showed us how to see beyond our immediate challenges. The assault began to look less like a random act of violence and more like a complex social narrative. The young men who attacked Edward were products of the very system he had spent decades trying to change. Maria's investigation revealed something else, a pattern of economic struggle in the neighborhood. Unemployment rates, limited educational opportunities, a cycle of limited resources that seemed to trap generation after generation. Edward's work had been a consistent effort to interrupt that cycle. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Oakwood, Detective Reyes realized she was no longer just investigating an assault. She was unraveling a story of community, resilience, and the profound impact one dedicated individual could have. The photograph of Edward's son, the military officer, seemed to watch from her case file. There was a connection here, a deeper narrative about service, about standing up, about making a difference. What had seemed like a straightforward case was transforming into something far more significant. The roots of this story ran deep, intertwining personal history, community struggle, and an unwavering commitment to human potential. And Edward Harris was at the center of it all, not as a victim, but as a persistent force of hope and understanding. The military transport plane touched down at Andrews Air Force Base with a precision that mirrored the man preparing to disembark. Major Michael Harris moved with a calculated grace, years of military training evident in every step. His dress uniform, meticulously pressed, medals gleaming, spoke of achievements far beyond his years. A priority message had pulled him from a critical strategic planning session in Germany. His father, Edward Harris, had been assaulted. The words burned in Michael's mind, a contradiction to everything he knew about his father, a man who had navigated life's challenges with wisdom and patience. The drive from the base to Oakwood was a journey through memory and concern. Michael knew his father's neighborhood like the back of his hand, each street, each corner holding stories of his childhood. But today, the familiar landscape felt different, charged, unsettled. At the hospital, Michael's presence created an immediate shift in atmosphere. Nurses straightened unconsciously. Detective Maria Reyes, who had been coordinating the investigation, found herself standing a little taller as he approached. "Major Harris," she said, extending her hand. Michael's handshake was firm, professional. His eyes, deep brown like his father's, took in every detail of the room, every nuance of the conversation. "Tell me everything," he requested, his voice a blend of military precision and personal concern. The detective began to outline the investigation. Michael listened without interruption, his mind processing information with the same strategic approach he used in military operations. But this was personal. This was about family. "My father has spent his entire life building this community," Michael said quietly after she finished. "This isn't just an assault. This is an attack on everything he represents." He pulled out a photograph, Edward in his early teaching days, standing with a group of students. The image told a story of dedication, of hope. Michael's finger traced the edges of the picture, a rare moment of vulnerability breaking through his professional demeanor. Local community leaders began to reach out. They understood the significance of Michael's return. This wasn't just a son coming home. This was a strategic thinker, a leader who had managed complex humanitarian missions in some of the world's most challenging regions. At a meeting with local authorities, Michael's approach became clear. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was seeking understanding. "We don't solve problems by creating more problems," he explained to the assembled group of police chiefs, community leaders, and local government representatives. "My father's life work has been about breaking cycles of violence, not perpetuating them." His military background gave weight to his words. Here was a man who had seen conflict up close, who understood that true resolution came from addressing root causes, not symptoms. Michael spent hours with Detective Reyes, diving deep into the investigation. They mapped out the economic challenges of the neighborhood, the limited opportunities that had shaped the young men's actions. Each piece of information was analyzed with the same intensity Michael would apply to a complex military strategy. At home, he sat with his father. Edward, still recovering, looked smaller in the hospital bed, but his eyes, sharp, intelligent, missed nothing. "I know what you're thinking," Edward said softly. "You want to solve this like a military operation." Michael smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "And you want to solve it like a teacher." Their conversation was a dance of perspectives. Michael's strategic approach, Edward's compassionate understanding. Two different methods, but with the same ultimate goal, transformation. Local community centers became Michael's temporary command center. He leveraged his military and professional connections, creating a network of support that extended far beyond traditional law enforcement approaches. Scholarships were quietly established. Job training programs were developed. Michael used his influence to create opportunities, understanding that true change required more than punishment. It required hope. The young men who had assaulted his father became more than just a case file. They became a challenge a complex human problem that required nuanced solutions. As evening fell, Michael stood by the hospital window. The Oakwood neighborhood stretched before him, a landscape of potential, of challenges, of hope. His father's life work was about to become something more than a personal history. It was about to become a movement. The roots of change were already taking hold. The Oakwood Youth Center stood as a silent witness to generations of neighborhood stories. Here, Major Michael Harris and Detective Maria Rees began the intricate process of understanding the lives of the three young men responsible for his father's assault. Jake Rodriguez sat across from them, his posture a mix of defiance and uncertainty. At 21, he carried the weight of his family's economic struggles like a heavy coat. His mother worked double shifts at a local manufacturing plant. His younger siblings depended on his support, and opportunities seemed as distant stars. "Tell me about the day of the incident," Michael prompted, his voice calm, but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to extracting critical information. Jake's story unfolded in fragments. Unemployment had worn down his hope. Each job application rejected, each opportunity missed had created a pressure cooker of frustration. Ramon Martinez and Tyler Williams, his companions in the assault, were navigating similar landscapes of limited potential. Detective Rees carefully documented the context. This wasn't a simple case of random violence. It was a narrative of systemic challenges, of young men caught in a cycle they seemed unable to break. Michael recognized the pattern. During his military deployments, he had seen similar dynamics in communities struggling with economic instability. The assault on his father was a symptom of a much larger issue. Across town, Ramon's grandmother, Elena Martinez, shared her perspective. A retired seamstress who had immigrated decades ago, she spoke of the changing neighborhood. "These young men," she explained, her hands busy mending a worn shirt, "they have passion. What they lack is direction." Tyler's situation revealed another layer of complexity. A high school dropout, he had been caring for his disabled father, juggling odd jobs and family responsibilities. The assault seemed less like a deliberate act of violence and more like a moment of misguided desperation. Michael's military training kicked in. He began mapping out the interconnected challenges. Unemployment rates in Oakwood had been climbing. Local industries had been shutting down. Educational opportunities were limited. Each factor created a domino effect of limited potential. At a strategic meeting with local leaders, Michael presented a comprehensive analysis. "We're not looking at criminals," he explained. "We're looking at a community that needs support, redirection, and opportunity." The local economic development director, Sarah Chen, provided additional context. "We've lost 3 major employers in the past 5 years," she revealed. "These young men represent a generation caught between disappearing industries and emerging technological demands." Detective Rees uncovered additional details. Jake had been a promising student in high school with strong mathematics skills. Raymond had shown exceptional mechanical aptitude. Tyler had a natural talent for digital design that had gone unexplored. Michael began to see a pattern, a series of missed opportunities, of potential waiting to be unlocked. His father's approach became clearer now. Edward Harris had always believed in seeing beyond the immediate circumstance, in understanding the human potential beneath surface-level challenges. Community leaders, initially defensive, began to listen. Michael's military precision, combined with his father's compassionate approach, created a unique strategy. This wasn't about punishment. This was about intervention, about creating pathways to success. Meetings were arranged. Local businesses, technical colleges, and community organizations began to collaborate. Scholarship programs were developed. Mentorship initiatives took shape. Each young man would be given a genuine opportunity to redefine their trajectory. Jake was offered an apprenticeship in advanced manufacturing. Ramon received technical training in automotive design. Tyler was connected with a digital media training program that recognized his natural talents. The assault on Edward Harris was transforming from a moment of violence into a catalyst for community change. As evening fell, Michael stood with his father in the hospital room. Edward, still recovering, listened intently as Michael outlined the emerging plan. "You've always said," Michael remarked, "that every challenge is an opportunity for understanding." Edward's eyes, tired but bright, reflected a lifetime of believing in human potential. "And understanding," he responded softly, "is the first step toward genuine change." Outside the hospital window, Oakwood began to look different, not through grand gestures, but through careful, intentional steps toward possibility. The roots of transformation were taking hold, one careful connection at a time. The first session of the intervention program felt more like a tense family gathering than a traditional rehabilitation meeting. Jake, Ramon, and Tyler sat in a semicircle, their body language a mix of defensiveness and uncertainty. At the front of the room, Edward Harris, still recovering from his injuries, sat beside his son Michael and Detective Maria Reyes. The community center's meeting room bore witness to countless stories of struggle and hope. Worn wooden chairs, faded motivational posters, and the soft hum of an old air conditioner created an atmosphere of raw authenticity. "This isn't punishment," Edward began, his voice calm and measured. "This is an opportunity." Michael stood beside him, his military posture a stark contrast to the soft-spoken approach of his father. Yet there was a synchronicity between them, a shared belief in human potential that transcended their different methodologies. Each young man carried a different weight. Jake's shoulders hunched with the responsibility of his family's financial struggles. Raymond's eyes darted nervously, years of feeling overlooked creating a protective shell. Tyler's hands fidgeted, revealing an underlying anxiety about his future. The initial plan was comprehensive. Each participant would undergo a multifaceted program designed to address both immediate challenges and long-term potential. Technical training, counseling, community service, and educational support formed the core of the intervention. Sarah Rodriguez, a local social worker with decades of experience, had helped design the program. "We're not fixing you," she explained during the first session. "We're giving you tools to fix yourselves." Jake was paired with a local manufacturing mentor. His mathematical skills, long dormant, began to resurface. Complex machinery that once seemed intimidating now became a puzzle he was eager to solve. Weekly training sessions revealed a natural aptitude that had been buried beneath years of economic frustration. Ramon found himself in an automotive workshop, working alongside seasoned mechanics who saw beyond his past mistakes. His hands, which had once been instruments of violence, now learned the delicate art of automotive repair. Each repaired engine became a small victory, a testament to his potential for creation rather than destruction. Tyler's journey took him into the world of digital media. A local graphic design studio offered him an internship, recognizing the raw talent that had been waiting to be developed. Computer screens that once represented escape now became windows of opportunity. The program wasn't just about skill development. Weekly group sessions challenged the participants to confront the circumstances that had led them to their previous actions. Edward facilitated these discussions, his years of teaching evident in how he drew out deeper conversations. "Tell me about the moment," he would ask, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. "What happened before the moment?" Detective Reese maintained oversight, but her role transformed. She was no longer just law enforcement, but a bridge between past actions and future potential. Michael brought in guest speakers, veterans, community leaders, individuals who had overcome significant challenges. Each story was a testament to the possibility of transformation. The young men's families became integral to the process. Jake's mother, initially skeptical, watched her son's transformation with growing hope. Raymond's grandmother became a vocal supporter, her wisdom adding depth to the intervention. Community service became a crucial component. They worked on neighborhood improvement projects, cleaning parks, supporting local senior centers, rebuilding a sense of connection they had previously destroyed. Edward's hospital recovery became an unexpected classroom. The young men would visit, helping with small tasks, listening to his stories. What began as a mandated part of their program slowly transformed into genuine connection. One afternoon, Tyler helped Edward organize old teaching materials. Photographs of past students, decades of educational memories spread across the table. "You really believed in people," Tyler commented, looking at a wall of graduation photos. Edward's response was characteristic. "Everyone has a story worth believing in," he said softly. Michael observed these interactions, his military strategic mind seeing the larger picture. This wasn't just about rehabilitation. This was about rebuilding human connections, about creating pathways where none seemed to exist. As weeks turned into months, subtle changes became apparent. Jake's posture straightened. Ramon's nervous glances were replaced by direct eye contact. Tyler's hands, once constantly in motion, now moved with purpose. The assault that had brought them together was becoming a distant memory, overshadowed by a journey of unexpected transformation. The Oakwood neighborhood began to watch, to hope, to believe that change was possible, one individual, one connection at a time. 6 months into the intervention program, the Oakwood Community Center buzzed with an energy that felt revolutionary. What had begun as a court-mandated rehabilitation initiative had transformed into something far more profound, a living testament to human potential. Jake Rodriguez stood behind a computer-controlled manufacturing system, his movements precise and confident. The manufacturing plant where he now worked had initially been skeptical. Now, he was their most promising young technician. His mathematical skills, once buried beneath layers of frustration, now solved complex production challenges that stumped more experienced workers. During his lunch break, Jake would often visit the community center's mentorship program. He now volunteered, working with younger students who reminded him of his former self. "Math isn't just numbers," he would tell them. "It's a way of solving life's problems." Ramon Martinez's transformation was equally remarkable. The automotive workshop where he trained had become more than a workplace. It was a canvas for his creativity. Cars that once seemed like incomprehensible machines now spoke to him in a language of mechanics and possibility. His mentor, Carlos Hernandez, had become more than an instructor. He was a father figure who saw potential where others saw only past mistakes. "You're not defined by your worst moment," Carlos would tell him. 1 year after the assault that had changed everything, Oakwood Community Center prepared for its most significant event. The annual community gathering would now tell a story of transformation that few could have imagined. Edward Harris stood at the podium, his presence both gentle and powerful. The physical scars of the assault had healed, but the deeper marks of that night had become a catalyst for unprecedented change. His son Michael stood nearby, a silent pillar of support, his military bearing softened by the pride of witnessing true rehabilitation. Jake Rodriguez approached the stage first. His journey from a frustrated young man to a skilled manufacturing technician represented more than personal success. He had become a mentor to younger students, showing them that mathematical skills could be a pathway to opportunity. His company had promoted him, recognizing not just his technical abilities, but his commitment to growth. "I used to think the world was against me," Jake said, his voice steady. "Now I understand that opportunity is something you create, not something that happens to you." Ramon Martinez followed, his hands, once instruments of violence, now skilled in automotive repair. He had not only completed his technical training, but had started a small community workshop program teaching basic automotive skills to at-risk youth. His grandmother sat in the front row, tears of pride glistening in her eyes. "Every car I fix," Raymond explained, "is a reminder that we can rebuild what's broken, not just engines, but lives." Tyler Williams presented a multimedia display documenting the transformation of their group. His digital design skills had found purpose beyond personal ambition. The documentary he created had been featured in local film festivals, drawing attention to alternative approaches to rehabilitation. Detective Maria Reyes, who had evolved from an investigating officer to a key supporter of the intervention program, shared statistical evidence. Recidivism rates in the neighborhood had dropped dramatically. More significantly, youth engagement in positive community programs had increased by over 60%. Local business leaders who had initially been skeptical now spoke of the program as a model of community intervention. The approach developed in Oakwood was being studied by social workers, law enforcement agencies, and educational institutions across the state. Edward's philosophy of education, that every individual carries inherent potential, had been proven not through academic theory, but through lived experience. The assault that had initially brought these young men together now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by a journey of collective healing. Michael Harris reflected on the strategic approach that had made this transformation possible. True intervention, he explained, is about creating ecosystems of opportunity. It's not just about individual support, but about building comprehensive pathways to success. The community center had become more than a building. It was a symbol of what was possible when compassion met strategic thinking. The walls were lined with photographs, before and after images that told stories of remarkable transformation. Jake, Ramon, and Tyler had become more than success stories. They were now community leaders, actively working to create similar opportunities for others. Their monthly mentorship programs were oversubscribed, with young people eager to learn from their experiences. Edward's approach, seeing potential where others saw only problems, had become a community philosophy. Local schools began implementing more comprehensive support programs. Law enforcement started focusing on intervention rather than pure punishment. As the evening drew to a close, a surprise awaited the audience. The three young men who had initially assaulted Edward presented him with a community service award. It was a moment of profound symbolism, a testament to the power of understanding, compassion, and genuine rehabilitation. "Mr. Harris," Jake said, speaking on behalf of the group, "you taught us that our past doesn't define our future. You showed us that every moment is an opportunity to rewrite our story." The audience, a mix of community leaders, families, students, and local officials, stood in a prolonged standing ovation. This was more than an acknowledgement of individual success. It was a celebration of collective transformation. Outside the community center, the Oakwood neighborhood looked different. Streets that had once felt divided now seemed connected. Hope was no longer an abstract concept, but a tangible reality etched into the community's landscape. Edward looked at his son Michael, their eyes meeting in a moment of shared understanding. This was why education mattered. This was the true meaning of service, not just to individuals, but to the entire human community. As night fell, the community center's lights remained on, a beacon of possibility, a reminder that every challenge carried within it the seeds of extraordinary transformation.